So, gating. It's a really interesting technique that can yield really good and interesting sounds. So, what's a gate anyway? An audio gate, in its simplest form, is essentially a volume control with a threshold. And you used to put it over an input channel of a mixing desk, such that it blocked out any sound until the singer began to sing or the guitar player began to play, so you don't get all the hiss and the background noise on the recordings. But engineers, being what they are, soon found some creative uses other than just simply blocking off sound when it wasn't needed. For example, gating reverb and trigger gating. And trigger gating is something that we're going to look at. A bit of background about how you set up, or how you used to do trigger gating in the old days with analog consoles. You would first of all take a pad or whatever you wanted to gate into an input channel, and then you'd go ascend to a gate and return back to the channel, and then you'd use another channel to trigger the gate. So let's say the classic example of a hi-hat pattern. You would take the output from the hi-hat pattern via a cable and you'd go into the sidechain input on the back of the gate, which would then open the gate when that audio signal arrived at the gate. So on your source channel you have your sustaining sound that you want to gate, and then you have the hi-hat pattern, in this case, opening the gate rhythmically according to whatever the hi-hat pattern was. That's a kind of classic trigger gate. Bit of a hassle to set up in the analog domain. Not terribly difficult, but a hassle with cables and all that kind of stuff. So lucky us, we live in a digital world, and now we can do it all very easily inside the computer. You can set up an audio gate. Let me show you. If I use Cubase's gate, here it is. With this, you gate your input channel, and then you turn this little ditty on here, and then you send an audio signal, not a MIDI signal, an audio signal, into this gate, and it will open according to that input, often called your key input. Personally, when I'm doing my own productions, I tend to prefer to use a MIDI gate because you have a lot more control over the length of the notes and you can get a lot more fancy with the patterns. So we'll ignore the audio gate in digital form and we'll look at the MIDI gate, which is my preferred weapon of choice. Okay, so here it is. This is Cubase's MIDI gate. Handy little plug. How this works is you set up a MIDI channel and you send, that's your destination, you send to MIDI gate there. So the output from that MIDI is going into this gate now. And then you put the gate across the channel that you want to gate, or trigger gate in this case. I hope I'm not babbling too much and I hope you can follow me so far. So let's bypass it just for now, and I've set up a sustaining sound here, which in this case is just a sample, pretty random sample on my hard drive when I was floating around with my portable recorder in London. And it's a Victoria station. So there you go. Now let's turn the gate on and let's play it again, and you get nothing because the gate's closed. Now if we turn our trigger on, then, by the way, let's look at the trigger pattern first. Nothing very exciting there. I've just set up a straight 16th note pattern and to 30-second note lengths, more or less. So let's play them both together with the trigger and the source. So there you go. So you get a rhythmic sound instead of a sustained sound. Bypass. And notice, if I bypass, then it's quiet, it's louder. That's because when you're gating, if you think about it, you're chopping out half of the amount of sound energy because you're just letting little bits through. So it's good to remember to turn it up to compensate. So there we have a rhythmic thing going on now. Let's add some drums. Eventually. Right. Yeah. So, from victorious to stationing to something kind of interesting. Bit of auto pan. One of the big advantages of trigger gating is that you can just chuck anything into the gate and it chops it up rhythmically, so at least if it's not harmonically suitable, at least it's rhythmically grooving. And the other thing is you can get interesting and weird sounds as well, which is always good. So let's have a look at what we have here. I've just got this is another classic uses to Gator vocal. I've just got some time stretched vocal, badly time stretched, but with a bit of gate magic. Let's just shift those a bit because they're a bit out. It's better. Yeah, you don't have to stop at gated vocals, you can just grab any old bit of audio, random old 70s tracks. Put a bass line in and you're off to the races. Another use of gates is to tighten things up. Just give you a quick example. Turn the gate off, bypass it, and what we have here is, I think, is a bit of wah-wah guitar, typical of a 70s porn movie. Or so they tell me anyway. Now, cool. But a little bit old school and not quite electronic-ish and tight. So, let's put the gate on. And the trigger. Bit of delay. straight 16th pattern again. Quick trill in there. So we're kind of getting on to the point of using a MIDI gate, which is you have more options over your rhythmic pattern. And now moving on to a classic use of a trigger gate is with a sustained pad. So here I have a pad sound over 4 bars, part over 4 bars. And if I bring this gate in here, now this is a more complex pattern, several trills in, which is kind of the point of using a MIDI gate rather than a other type of gate. Let's try it with a bit of drums. I want to show you another type of gate plugin just before we get on to the next thing, which is this type of thing. This is a freebie called Trigger Gate, and it's great actually. It's very easy to use, and you have your pattern already built in here. So I'm now using this only with no MIDI input, and it sounds like, if I move this down, it follows the pattern up here. So if I can edit my pattern here. It also has the floor control as well, so you can bring it in. And here's the envelope, attack and release. Getting a bit of a click there with 0 release. So, all in all, it's very good. So why don't I use it? Well, I do sometimes, but it's limited on the kind of complexity of the pattern that you can draw. You've basically got 16th notes, and you can put a little 8th note in every now and again. And the pattern's quite short, so it's quite limiting. But if you just want to do straight 16th gating, it's great. It's fine. Easy to set up, and you're off. So back to our MIDI gate. If you listen here, I have a more complex pattern set up. You wouldn't be able to do this in that last plugin, you see? And you wouldn't be able to vary it as much over time. In this pattern it gets more complex the further it goes on. I think it does anyway. Yeah, look, it's got all this stuff going on. So let's put the Victoria Station and the gated pad together, see what we come up with. So there's two gates going, hammer and tongs. Now, lastly, not everybody uses Cubase as a production tool, and the MIDI gate that I was using is a Cubase plugin. But luckily for us, there are several freebie plugins available, and this is one such plugin. If I turn that gate off, that one off, and turn this one on, this is called Gator, and it's free, and it's a VST, so it'll work in pretty much any sequencer, and it is from the website below. Let's hear what it sounds like. In fact, it's a little bit better than the Cubase one in some respects. The envelope is much more precise, and it has 4 stages. Let's have a little listen to see what it sounds like. So you can get very small but percussive sounds. So there's a range of different sounds. Some of these kind of gated pad sounds sound nicer when you have a softer attack. Rather than, which can sound good too, but it depends on the context. But they gated pad, gated voices and stuff sound quite nice with a bit of a slower attack. The only naff thing about this plugin is it's very fussy about which MIDI note it receives. You can choose any MIDI note you like. I've got it on, it defaults to 60, which is C3. So in other words, it'll gate on this note only. If you play D or any of these, it won't open the gate. So that's the only slightly naff thing about it. Whereas the Cubase one, you can use any of the notes and it'll just open it. It just uses the ignores the pitch, and any MIDI note coming in is a valid trigger. So that's trigger gating. Have fun with that. It's a great technique.